At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce to you one of the key figures in my development here with the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe, someone I've always enjoyed the company of, someone I have extremely grand respect for. And at this time, I would like to ask to the podium Dr. Suzanne Cross.
As some of you may know, I'm a professor at Michigan State University, and I've been studying the boarding school issues for the last 5 years approximately. And I've talked to people in the state of Washington, Arizona, Minnesota, and Michigan. Conducted interviews, paper, pencil, and also videotaped interviews. And I've written a book that's in press, and it will come with a DVD, 37 minutes for individuals sharing their stories. Try to include the different generations. The youngest person is in his late 40s, the oldest is in her mid-70s, to give the idea that it wasn't just one generation. I shared some of the knowledge that I have gained with the Zebowing staff and director and curator, and also pull this down. Also a story I've written. It's more of an account than a story, but I usually do an hour presentation, and then I share this story that I've written in regard to my mother's experience here at the Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School and how it impacted her life and my life. So I will begin reading the story. It's entitled, "I Didn't Know You Went to Boarding School." At lunch, my friend and I were sitting across from each other in a restaurant when she noticed my first action was to quickly take the silverware, which was rolled up in a cloth napkin, and put it in the exact proper setting. Then she noticed I cut my food into tiny little pieces and ate with exactitude. She asked, "How did you learn to do that?" I said, "Boarding school." She said, "I didn't know you went to boarding school." I promptly responded, "I didn't, but my mother did." I actually was surprised at my own response, but on occasion, the truth avails itself when it's least expected. I intend no diversion from the experiences of others who actually attended boarding school. However, it is important to acknowledge parental attendance had an impact on the lives of their children and continues to resonate into the subsequent generations. At 7, Violet, my mother, Rose, her 6-year-old sister, and Joseph, her 4-year-old brother, were removed from the family home due to lack of food, their father working away from the home as a lumberjack, and their mother deceased at childbirth. The government people, as they were called at that time, did not understand the concept of extended family system. As a result, they were oblivious to the fact these children were being cared for by relatives and the community as a whole. When my mother, auntie, and uncle, as children, arrived at the Mount Pleasant Industrial Boarding School, they were immediately separated into age and gender groups. Their hair cut crudely and short, stripped of their traditional clothing, including sacred protective items, which were discarded. They were then deloused with a harsh chemical powder which burned their eyes, mouth, throat, and skin. Next, they were suited with military dress code uniforms and dresses and assigned to dormitories based on their gender and age. My mother only saw her siblings while marching in rank to and from buildings. She and her sister did not acknowledge one another for fear of being severely disciplined. However, Joseph, who was only 4, upon seeing my mother, who was marching across the compound to the lunch hall as he marched in the opposite direction, broke rank, ran to her, and embraced her tightly as he became tearful and inconsolable. She held him for a moment, and then the matron separated the two of them. The punishment for breaking rank was administered swift and harsh. They both experienced the public humiliation of being beaten with a belt in front of other children who stood in military straight-lined silence. As she recalled from that day forward, while at school, when she saw Joseph coming toward her, she would turn her head away from him as to give him no acknowledgement at all, so neither would be punished again for the same act. She was so remorseful as she accounted this incident, it troubled her all of her life. She resented having to reject her little brother in order to save them both from the wrath of the strict disciplinarians. I make the assumption of my mother as being a high-spirited child, which intensified her negative boarding school experience. Her punishments included the act of name-calling, slapping, punching, being forced to eat or go without food, and extreme cleaning duties. The punishments she received most frequently required her to kneel on uncooked rice on a cement floor for hours, being beaten with a belt, locked in a dark broom closet, or outside in a wooden box. She also witnessed the sexual abuse of others, including young girls in the 100-bed dormitory at night by the matron in exchange for food. Food was placed on a young girl's bed to convey it was her turn to spend the night with the matron. My mother said I could almost feel when it was going to be my turn to spend the night with her. Her method of prevention was to break the rules during the day to provoke a beating with the belt, for she knew the matron never spent the night with a girl who had just been beaten. This provocation became her method of self-protection. A second significant incident that repeatedly came to mind for my mother was the last time she was locked in the broom closet. The broom and mop handles were laid crisscross on the floor, and she was required to kneel on them. If at any time the door opened and she was not kneeling, more time would be added to her punishment. She indicated she would distract herself from the pain by thinking of how her life would be as an adult and how she was going to treat her children. She knew it would be the opposite of this. After 2 years of being disciplined in this manner, she felt something inside of her would crumble or die if she did not fight back. So when the door opened, instead of kneeling, she stood facing the door proudly as it opened, as if she were dressed in her traditional clothing and had her sacred medicine bag. She was told, "Get down, kneel." She defied the order by standing. The order was repeated, but she continued to stand firm. Other children began to notice that she was not giving in to the order. This caused more distress for the matron. After she defied numerous attempts to make her kneel, Violet began to repeat under her breath, "Unda mash kuzi, unda mash kuzi," until she found herself yelling proudly, "Unda mash kuzi," which translates to "I am strong." Her behavior drew too much attention from the other children. As a result, 3 adults removed her to the out of doors. She was beaten with a belt and locked in a wooden box. She recalled it being cold, and she was left there for 3 days with no food or water. From the eyes of the observer, she was punished even more severely. However, she felt she had won by standing up for herself and by speaking aloud one word of her language. She was never put in the closet again. Unfortunately, for the following 7 years, the belt in the wooden box became the punishment of choice whenever she broke the rules. It's a little difficult being on this property and being able to share this. I've shared this before, but being here adds something to it. I learned much from my mother's boarding school experience, which includes to eat quietly and precisely, for the consequence of making any noise with your silver or plateware was to mandatory take silent leave from the table. To clean the house in such detail as to require toothbrushes, Q-tips, and toothpicks to remove the smallest particle of dirt, which was barely seen by the naked eye. I learned a different American Indian history than the children in the mainstream schools I attended. I learned the meaning of injustice, brutality, mistrust, and the cost of many, many losses. I also learned survival skills, which include to honor and keep your children close to you, the importance of observation and the analysis of a situation, concern for the safety of others, the importance of organization and detailed planning, perseverance and self-reliance. Wounds can heal with the right environment. Mothers and daughters can be close despite the boarding school experience. And yes, most of all, protecting my spirit. Thank you for listening. Miigwech.
Sometimes it's painful to remember. Thank you, Dr. Krause, for sharing that. I know that was difficult. And we're going to have difficult moments today. That's part of why we're here, to support one another through these times and to make sure that each and every one of us know that we care for each and every one of us again and again and again.